Hey guys, and welcome back to the Mission Makers podcast. During the season break, we're diving back into some of our favourite moments of season 2, and this week we've put together some of the best insights into motorsport by 3 of our guests who came on the podcast last week. Peter Windsor, Mark Jenkins and Catherine Bondmuir, who together have more than 80 years combined serving at the highest levels of motorsport. So if you listened last week, you'll know that collectively they have written books on the subject, they've lectured in the world's best universities, presented for Sky Sports, managed Ferrari and Williams, and excitingly launched the first female race championship partnered with F1, the W Series. So in this episode, we'll hear their perspectives on managing Formula One teams, launching the W Series, and what it's like to study in the best university in the world for motorsport.
You've definitely worn a lot of hats in Formula One. Is there a role that stood out above from the others in terms of its level of commitment and difficulty?
Well, yeah, you're right. I mean, I've had a lot of different hats. I'm wearing the Bucco hat right now, only because Jim Clark used to wear Bucco helmets. I've never seen the Bucco logo anywhere, and thanks to Johnny Williams for this. I've been very, going back to that Jim Clark discussion I had when the 4 of us sitting there, I never imagined that I'd be so lucky to have basically a different job every year of my life and to see Formula One from a different perspective. And that's basically what's happened. Some of them have been not so good and difficult. Some of them have been amazing. In terms of commitment, in terms of focus, obviously being race and test team manager at Williams was like being in the army. You know, it was like being a platoon sergeant and up early every morning, last to leave the track, constantly thinking about damage limitation and trying to anticipate obviously things that would go wrong rather than how to make things go right. So that was it wasn't stressful, it was just very, very focused time of my life, which I really enjoyed in retrospect, partly because we were very successful and won a lot of races and won the championship. So I feel that was obviously I learned a lot in that time. And if I can learn something every day, hopefully I can put it to good use.
100%. And you obviously work very closely with Frank for a number of years. What's one of the key things that you learned from him about effective management and strong leadership?
Well, Frank was of the Jimmy Connors mode, total focus. So that enhanced everything that I was thinking anyway. So Frank was that on steroids, really. He was totally committed to running and to Formula One, and nothing else was of interest to him at all. To the point where, he used to get pretty scratchy if he had to spend Sunday afternoons having Sunday lunch with the family. I was just like, wow. I've got to get out of here. I've got to get back to the office and get on the phone and do something. So, that was Frank. I suppose that taught me that is a little bit over the top. I think with Frank also, one of the first things he said to me, and I started working for Frank initially on the sponsorship side, marketing side. He said, one thing I never want you to do, Peter, and which I've never done. I've never ever poached a sponsor from another team, never even approached them, let alone tried to get them. And I don't want you to do the same either. And this was at a time when quite a lot of sponsors were walking out the door to Ron Dennis and McLaren. So, that I always respected Frank for that. And it was the same with personnel. He said, I don't poach personnel from other teams. And the third thing Frank said was never begin a sentence with the word but. And I never have ever since. Well, I don't think I have. Tried not to anyway.
That's so interesting. So talking about that, what do you think will be some of the keys to returning Williams to its former glory days?
Well, obviously, it's all about people. You can do a great job in Formula One on a very, very small shoestring budget, by which I mean the bare minimum that you need in order just to go racing and to have a certain number of people around the car and in the design office and the engineering and the machine shop. But it is about people. You can have all the money in the world, the wrong people, and you can fail completely, as BAR proved. And you can have a very small, tight shop, as Force India proved, and still do a great job in recent times. And I think Williams do have money. It appears they have money to spend, which is good. But I think they also seem to be employing good people, getting good people. I mean, Jos Capito seems to be a really good guy. And my feeling is that they will become closer and closer to the Mercedes factory team. I think the new owners see that the future of Williams is going to be closely allied to Mercedes. And obviously, if Toto Wolff thinks this is a guy that should be at Williams, maybe he was instrumental in the Jos Capito appointment, I don't know. But if Toto thinks this is a good thing for Williams to do, then I'm sure Williams will just jump to it and do it.
You alluded to it, earlier about, one of the main things at that time was really thinking about the dangers and the risks and the failure. And obviously the sport is so unique in the fact that failure is absolutely critical, because if you're not pushing yourself to the limit and figuring out where that limit is, you won't succeed. So what's been one of your biggest learnings from failure in this environment?
Well, a lesson from failure is what you read in all the books. Every time you fail, you're actually learning something. So it is a step forward, and you have to be very strong with that. And I think that applies not only to failure, but to all the bad things that can happen to us in life. You have to try to see, you don't see it as a positive, but you have to see it as a step in your own life and try to use it as a way of being a stronger, better human being. I think that's the first point. In terms of real practicalities, I've had 3 attempts to do Formula One teams of my own, and all 3 have failed. But I can look myself in the mirror and say that if I had drawn up a list of all the things that I could have predicted might go wrong with each of those 3 projects, the thing that actually happened, I would never ever have dreamt of, because it was so way off left field that it was something that I don't think anybody could have predicted. And then I rationalized that by saying, and I guess that means that Formula One is just one huge ocean liner, and there's a captain of that ocean liner, and if he doesn't want you on the ship, you just get thrown overboard. And I think that's still the case today, really. I mean, Formula One is a private club, and I suppose it's that, the recognition of the private club, play by the rules, and often I don't play by the rules, because for ethical reasons or for reasons of thinking that I can do it better, probably mistakenly. But I think it's that. I've come up against Bernie Ecclestone several times. And although he's given me a lot of work over the years, and I've worked for Formula One for a long time and hopefully will in the future, he's a very difficult guy in a number of ways. And I suppose I've failed in not being able to predict how he was going to react to various situations, when I thought smugly that I probably was able to predict him, but I wasn't. And I guess that's one area where I have to say I failed.
Very interesting. Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us. Hopefully the club is getting less private with the changing ownership, and maybe a bit more accessible.
So going a little bit into the W Series, now I know that rather famously the idea kind of came around while sharing a glass of wine with friends around the dinner table. And you've since attributed a lot of that growth of the series to some of your colleagues like David Coulthard, Matt Bishop, Dave Ryan. So how did that team kind of come together, coming from a completely different industry, and how have your strengths kind of complemented each other along this journey?
Well, David Coulthard was the first person who became involved out of those people that you were discussing. And what became very clear to me early on is that if I was going to do this, that I needed to surround myself with people, with one who had credibility in motorsport, and 2, knew what they were talking about as far as motorsport was concerned. No one was ever going to pick the phone up to me and take me seriously. So David introduced actually the most important person in all of the mix, and that was our cornerstone investor. I can't underestimate how difficult it is to raise a few £1 million just on an idea. And he introduced a school friend of his called Sean Wadsworth, who has put in a really, really significant amount of money into the business. And being a business person myself, that's, money is really, is crucial to everything. So I have to thank David for that introduction. But obviously David also introduced Dave Ryan, who's the racing director at McLaren formerly, and also Matt Bishop, the comms director. And the 3 of us, so that was Dave, Matt and me, spent a huge amount of time in 2018, in the summer of 2018, sort of putting, the ideas together, David and Sean were working with us too. There was sort of a core of 5, and the little team was slowly growing, but we needed motorsport input, and that is what they all gave to us. So I'm rather embarrassed, that people say, oh, it's all you, because it's certainly not me. It's taken a village to produce W Series, and those people have been absolutely key. And I suggest without any one of those people, W Series wouldn't have been as successful as it has been.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that with me. And I definitely agree, you're only as good as your team. And so that's really, really important. I find it really interesting the way that you guys have actually designed the series. For example, I love that the race drivers get a different set of engineers each race, and they learn how to work with crews from all different countries, different languages, different cultures. So what was the creative process like behind designing the series?
Well, it was great fun, because I came from a background of first principles. So we didn't make any decision because it had been done before. We made every single decision because it was the right thing to do for us. And I think that's a very freeing process, actually allowing to be, we allowed ourselves to be as creative as possible. And at the heart of our DNA was equality. We wanted the drivers to have equal cars, and we didn't want the richer drivers to have an advantage. Therefore, we believed that we had to pay for the drives for all of the drivers. So, people like Alice Powell hadn't raced for over 5 years. The last time she had raced, she was in GP3. I mean, it's now, international Formula 3. And solely because of money, she couldn't get that money. Didn't have the ability to drive again. So, the structure of W Series was really based on those two principles: is that all the cars had to be identical, and we were going to pay for all of the expenses of the drivers. And the fusion of those two concepts means that we actually do find out who the fastest driver is. And whilst, the brilliant Jamie won, we had 6 races, but we did have 5 different winners of races. So, we did have, a lot of talent there. Right at the start of the season, it just worried me. We could control everything, but obviously what we couldn't control, what was going to happen out on the circuit. And it was just wonderful to see, 1, the quality of racing, but 2, that Jamie wasn't necessarily going to run away with the championship, like it looked like after the first 2 races.
Yeah, it definitely had you, on the edge of your seat, and that was fantastic. Especially the last couple of races when it was really the stakes were getting raised. So talking a little bit about what you talked about there about kind of getting your investor into the series. What were the kind of keys to getting him in? Because as you mentioned, obviously it was there wasn't a proof of concept yet. And how would the funding be impacted by COVID?
So how did you get him in? A lot of hard work and persuasion. No, actually, I think Sean was convinced by the fact that there was a massive gap in the market. When we started first talking, back in 2000 and sort of the end of 16, our really serious discussions started in 2017. Is that if you looked at the numbers of women who were racing in single-seater series throughout the world, as I've often said, the numbers at that point were going down year on year, and that trend had gone on for a number of years. And that was absolutely at the point where other sports like cricket, rugby, football, the women involved in those sports was increasing, their involvement was increasing significantly. So we both had this shared belief that there was something that was going wrong with motorsport, and actually that was a business opportunity, and that's why he believed that he could put his money in, and at some point he would get a return on it. And COVID, the impact of COVID, I think in the long term, I will look back and this isn't taking away the terrible nature of what has happened to millions of people across the world. But for us, it gave us a pause for thought. We were running at 1,000,000 miles an hour, going into the second season, this time last year. And when you do, when you set something up like this from scratch, you can't underestimate the amount of work that is involved and the number of, rabbit holes you go down. And, so, it's not everything that you do, you get right first time. So you have to keep repeating processes, which means that it is just extremely hard work. And last year gave us a pause. We had time to think about what we were, what we had achieved, what we could achieve, what we could turn into, and ultimately how to maintain, the sustainability of W Series. I'd been asked at length before we had started to race whether if we were successful, then we would cease to exist, because obviously we were all about getting more women into motorsport. And I said very clearly at the time, well, if we've got 30-50% of women who are racing, then W Series will cease to exist. But the way it was received, and especially I think the glory day of Brands Hatch, which is our last race in 2019, was such a fabulous day. I think W Series is here because I think as a sport it stands on its own 2 feet, and provided people want to watch it and be fans of W Series, I don't see any reason why it should stop.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think following your journey, you've spoken extensively about, people's opinions, which are obviously quite strong about women in motorsport. And I remember hearing you say once, if I'd listened to people's opinions on the W Series, it would never have happened. What kind of criticism was the idea getting? Were they more from the people within the industry or outside? And how did you deal with that emotionally and mentally?
Well, I'm the youngest of 4 children, and so I'm so very close together. I had 2 older brothers that I had a very pugilistic relationship with. So I had a good ability not to take on board people's criticisms too much. But a lot of the criticism actually happened from friends of mine involved in the sports industry. One of the major criticisms was a systemic criticism, and this is back in 2016, 17, 18, was to say, Catherine, it's a great idea. It certainly is required in motorsport, but remember, no one watches women's sport. And that was but they were not wrong. I mean, at that time, they didn't. The stats of the people in watching women's sport was really small, and we all need luck. And in 2019, because of the Women's World Cup, I think that started to change the way that people looked at women's sport. They believed for the first time that it could become commercially successful. I mean, if you look at what we achieved just in the UK with our Channel 4 broadcast, we became, just within 6 races, we became the second most watched motorsport in the UK after F1. And we were the second most watched female sport after football. So, I mean, what that did demonstrate to us is that there is a potential audience out there. Well, there is an audience, it's no potential. We believed that there was a potential audience, but we demonstrated that there actually actively was an audience. And of course, what we're looking to do is, grow that audience significantly, both in the UK and in the rest of the world this year.
What kind of common behaviour have you seen that maybe has derailed more drivers' careers?
I think it's not behaviour. I think it's all about money. I think that what we need to do is try and find a way, obviously, that more women can be involved in motorsport, but that it's not all about the money. Now, obviously, it's not about motorsport is this wonderful sport because there are so many ways that you can get involved in motorsport. You can be a marshal, you can be a steward, you can work for a team, you can set up a motor racing series. There are lots and lots of different touch points, but where we can encourage more women to come in directly is as engineers and mechanics, and there is a lot of effort on our behalf to try and find and encourage more female mechanics and engineers. At our Brands Hatch race, we bought 100 young girls from a charity called London Youth. And there were a lot of relatively underprivileged girls who came along. And it was interesting to see their reaction when they were shown all around W Series and our garaging, is that they didn't necessarily want to become a driver, but a lot of them said, I didn't know I could become a mechanic, because they saw female mechanics. And I think, that is very important for W Series, is to promote women's roles in not just in driving, but also in all other aspects of motorsport.
Yeah, definitely. And I think Dare to Be Different, or as they're now known, Women in Motorsport, make an amazing example of going into schools and organising those kinds of days, and really showcasing all the different career paths.
At Cranfield, which is one of the best places in the world to study motorsport, how do they do things very differently?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with your statement there. Thank you for saying it. Yeah, I think it is. I've been at Cranfield a fair while. And I'm in the management school, but I've always been sort of partly involved with the motorsport programs there, and it's been a privilege to be part of those. And I think for me, the thing that really set them apart was the strength of their advisory board. They've got around 20 people on the program advisory board. The Motorsports Advanced Engineering MSc started in 2000. And you've got people like Pat Simmons, Adrian Reynard. They've been around. They've taken on major roles in organisations, whether it's Adrian Reynard at BAR, Pat Simmons at Renault, and now he's technical director for Formula One. These are really practically orientated people, and they really engage with the students. Students go out and do a lot of projects, which is, a real feat when you consider the secrecy involved around some of these things. But it's because the whole programme is focused on practice. And I think one of the criticisms, of academia is it's become too separated often. And for me, the only value of theory is it can help you with practical problems. So you need to have both sides to really learn and really get the best out of things. Yeah. And I think that, to me, it's that engagement with practice, that engagement with practical solutions that's made the Cranfield programme so unique. And of course now we've got a lot of alumni, people who've been on the course who are now in quite senior roles in the Formula One teams.
Definitely, and also I'm aware there's a lot of amazing research and development facilities as well on campus. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I mean we've now got one of the first digital control towers because we have an airfield as well. So it's quite nice. Motorsports people can fly in on their helicopters or aeroplanes. But yes, the digital technology that we're now using, simulation technology, all really critical. And we've got a lot of experts in that area.
Thank you guys for listening. Season 3 will be back with a bang in the autumn. Until then, we've got plenty of impactful bonus and bite-sized episodes coming your way. So don't forget to subscribe and share the show with your friends because it truly means the world to us. And if you're interested in some super cool rewards like virtual DJ lessons with me, signed books from our guests, and exclusive merchandise, then head over to www.patreon.com/missionmakers to check out how you can start supporting the show for less than what it costs you to fill up your car. So till then, Mission Makers, be safe, be healthy, and be laser focused.